Shashingo is a game where you take pictures of objects to see what they're called in Japanese. Conceptually, this is a brilliant game. I love the art style and it might be one of the most aesthetic Japanese learning games I've played. However, I would not rely on it to actually learn Japanese. I was sent this game by the developer, so let's take a deeper look at Shashingo, what it's good at, what it's bad at, and whether you should get it.
Jouzu.
So a bit of a short story first. When I was first learning Japanese, alongside using Anki for the most common 2,000 words, I'd also just take photos of things that I didn't know. Signs, text, random objects, anything I was curious about. I'd look them up and then turn them into Anki cards so I wouldn't forget them. This is what we call mining, learning words from things you actually encounter. There are plenty of free tools out there that allow us to do this, and I've covered all the ones I use in this video up here. So when I first saw Shashingo, I was actually pretty excited because it basically allows you to do this exact method but in a virtual Japan from your own home. So going in, my plan was simple. Take pictures, find new words, and throw them into Anki. And honestly, that worked pretty well. Even at my level, surprisingly, there were some things that I'd never thought to ask, what's that in Japanese? So if you use Shashingo like this as a source of vocabulary, I think it has some value. But let's also take a look at the cons. My main problem with Shashingo is that the game is great at photography-based vocab, but weak whenever it tries to go beyond that. Matter of fact, in some cases, it can even harm your progress. Let me explain. First, what can be photographed is a little inconsistent. For example, you can scan the sky, but not the ground. You can scan this crossing, but not these tenji buroku. You can learn coffee, but not tea, soda, or water. Those are just called drinks. You can scan tree, but not leaves. You can scan the public toilet, but not male or female. Now, I get that it's too much to ask for literally everything to be scannable, but these examples just kind of make me go, huh? There's also a feature where you can click on signs to read them, which works most of the time, but I ran into a few cases where it just didn't. Now, none of these are a huge issue since I can always just screenshot and look things up for myself, but it does break the flow a little bit. Secondly, the learning and review systems outside of photography feel pretty underdeveloped. The main example is the review mode, where the game asks you to run around the map to find words that you've already photographed. And while that sounds like a fun idea, in practice, well, the goal of reviewing vocab is to make sure you remember what it means, right? But here, we also need to remember where it is. How does this help? The whole process actually becomes slower and more tedious because of this. Especially when you compare that to something like Anki, where you can review dozens of words in the same amount of time. And honestly, it's hard to justify that Shashingo is more fun because you're spending most of your time running back and forth on the same streets rather than actually learning. This just slows down your progress towards the real fun, which is actually understanding Japanese content. So in my opinion, a much stronger approach here would have been something simpler and faster like this, just matching the word to the photo you took. Furthermore, the game also tries to give you related words, but with no example sentences to show you how it's used. So if you're gonna include these related words, why not just provide example sentences? Or better yet, let us actually photograph these actions. Ultimately, I think it's okay the way it's done now. It's just a missed opportunity to do better. Third, and this is the biggest issue, the grammar explanations. Shashingo forgets that it's a game about photography and shifts into trying to teach you grammar. And this is where I have a fundamental problem. The game isn't meant to be a full learning tool. So why include grammar at all? Because now this is an actual risk. Grammar is something that can actively hurt the learner if explained poorly. A simple example is how Shashingo handles wa versus ga. This is one of the most commonly asked questions in Japanese, and the reason people get confused is because they're taught that a wa b and a ga b both mean a is b, This is incredibly frustrating, especially when you understand that there are methods that avoid this confusion entirely. Yes, there are learners who have become fluent without ever asking wa versus ga and can also clearly explain it back to you. This is why I choose to make videos on the method taught to me by my teacher, the late Kurodolly sensei. And you can learn this method too by clicking on this video up here. Fourth, let's talk about the actual value you get for $16. You see, the game only gives you around 145 photographable words packaged into a 2 to 3 hour experience. So the limited number of words, the short experience, and the fact that there are free alternatives that can offer the same kind of interaction with even more freedom, to me, it becomes very hard to justify the $16 price tag. See, even if you say, I don't care about efficiency, and you just want a relaxed, enjoyable experience, there's nothing stopping you from going into VR chat, which is free and does not need a VR headset, and you can jump into worlds that offer a very similar environment, but on an even bigger scale. Yes, you have to manually look up words and put them into Anki, but you'll have to do that anyway with Shashingo unless you plan to not use Anki for whatever reason. Furthermore, if we think about what else you can get for $16, there are plenty of Japanese games made for Japanese people with tens of thousands of words you can mine. See, I don't know a single person who has become fluent from playing games for learners, but I do know plenty of people who have gotten fluent from playing actual games though. So in my opinion, unless you value this specific presentation, there really isn't a strong reason to pay for this. Listen, after all that, you might think that I hate the game, but actually it's quite the opposite. I like the game. I just don't like it enough to recommend it as a serious learning option. What I do recommend though is double checking your understanding of Japanese sentence structure by watching this video next.